Hey guys, tonight we drift up through misty clouds, past the stars that blink like ancient lanterns, and toward a mountaintop you've definitely seen on a souvenir fridge magnet, Mount Olympus. The air is thin, cool, and surprisingly scented with pomegranate and olive oil. Columns rise out of nowhere, sun never quite sets, and somewhere off to the side, you're pretty sure you hear a lyre being tuned by someone who's either a god or a very confident goat. This is the divine living room of the Greek pantheon, a glorified co-working space for immortals with very messy personal lives. And trust me, if you're hoping for nobility and wisdom, you may want to lower those expectations like a temple sacrifice rope. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at Olympus, not with trumpets and glory, but with the quiet squelch of your sandals on some oddly pristine marble. Gods do love their aesthetics. The sky swirls with constant sunset, and you quickly realize the place is far less divine council and more ancient group chat that never silenced notifications. You see Zeus first? He's not hard to find. Golden curls, a jawline that's been sculpted more times than the Parthenon's roof, and a thunderbolt he spins like a fidget toy. He's lounging on a couch made of cloud and gold, arguing with a large eagle over the correct placement of ambrosia platters. Nearby, Hera sits perfectly still, sipping nectar, eyes locked in the thousand-yard stare of someone who's married to the HR complaint department of the cosmos. You can already sense the tension. It hums in the air like an overcharged hairdryer. To your left, Athena is quietly reading, while side-eyeing Ares, who's lifting weights made of bronze and pure ego. Hermes zips past you mid-sentence, drops a scroll in your lap, and is gone, before you realize the scroll just says LOL. Dionysus is somewhere in the back, organizing what he insists is not a party, but a deeply religious rite, though the wine fountain, leopard skin toga, and synchronized dancers suggest otherwise. Hades didn't even bother to show up. Typical. What's most surreal about Olympus isn't the gods themselves. It's the vibe. You expect majesty, you get divine reality TV. They bicker, they flirt, they sulk. One moment they're plotting the fall of Troy. The next they're arguing about who left their chariot double parked in the star lanes. You wonder how this chaotic cast ever got worshipped by civilizations that built aqueducts and democracy. But then, a funny thing happens. You start noticing something underneath the madness. Ritual. These gods aren't just immortal. They're stuck. Every tale, every feud, every prophecy, it loops. Like an eternal group therapy session with too much wine and no licensed counselor. Zeus needs to cheat. Hera needs to rage. Poseidon needs to flood. Over and over, historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks made the gods in their own image, or if it was the other way around. But either way, you get the feeling these immortals are just as bored and confused as the mortals who prayed to them. You eavesdrop on one of the stranger conversations. Apollo is arguing with Artemis about moonlight rites. Apparently, she's accused him of monopolizing solar narrative space, and he's countering with something about astral brand synergy. You quietly sidestep. These sibling spats have a body count. Somewhere, a satyr spills something, and Zeus absent-mindedly fries him with a flick of electricity. No one reacts, not even the goat. Mainstream historians agree that the Greek pantheon reflected ancient life, its glories and disasters, its moments of peace and unbearable chaos. But there's a lesser-known theory, too, that Olympus wasn't up in the heavens at all, but just a metaphor for power dynamics right here on Earth. A divine soap opera meant to explain why your village got randomly destroyed by lightning. You wander deeper into the palace. The floor shifts slightly as if Olympus itself is adjusting position, maybe trying to get comfortable. There are no walls, really, just endless rooms, each echoing with stories that have been repeated so many times they practically hum like lullabies. As you pass a hallway lined with statues, you pause at one. It's not a god, but a mortal. Phaethon, maybe, or some other ambitious fool who tried to live up here. The marble is cracked, a reminder that even in a world of eternal beings, nothing stays untouched forever. A soft wind brushes past. It smells like honey and burnt scrolls. You wonder, if you stayed here long enough, would you start looping too? Would you become part of the myth machine? Forever reenacting the same dramas, sipping the same nectar, pretending any of it really mattered? You don't get an answer. Instead, the lyre music returns, soft, slow, and sleepy. And so, your tour of Olympus begins, not with grandeur, but with the strange realization that even gods get tired. You barely have time to digest the chaotic divinity of Olympus before a sharp gust of wind rustles the clouds, and boom! Zeus is front and center again. There's no ceremony. One blink, and he's just there, thunderbolt in one hand, olive in the other, talking with the volume of someone who hasn't met an indoor voice in 4 millennia. Zeus, king of the gods, master of the sky, father of, well, everyone apparently. And not in the sweet Father Christmas kind of way. More like the please don't check the family tree too closely kind of way. You follow him through a grand marble corridor, shaped like a lightning bolt that doubles as his ego extension. His robe flows dramatically behind him, even when there's no wind. Probably enchanted for extra flair. He's mid-rant about how no one respects sky gods anymore, and how the mortals just don't pray like they used to. Then mid-sentence, without missing a beat, he winks at a passing nymph and turns into a swan. Yes, a swan. And you think, okay, now we're doing this. See, Zeus has a reputation. Even the ancient poets were like, we should probably not put all of this in the kids' version. His divine powers, control of the sky, judgment of mortals, kingly wisdom. But his hobby? Shapeshifting into bizarre animals to pursue mortal women, which is either magical courtship or cosmic HR violation, depending on how generous you're feeling. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphorical, allegories for divine influence, fertility myths, or some extremely creative excuses for weather events. But let's be honest, sometimes a goose is just a goose. And sometimes it's Zeus. You wander alongside him through a series of past incidents, now immortalized in temple murals and uncomfortable dinner conversations. There's the time he became a golden shower, yes, really, to visit Danae. Then the bull episode with Europa. Then that one time he seduced Leda as a swan, which seems like a weird flex unless you're really into feathers. You pass a fresco showing Zeus as an eagle mid-kidnap of a Trojan prince named Ganymede, who was promptly brought to Olympus as cupbearer and allegedly eye candy. It's hard to tell what's more disturbing, the divine entitlement or the frequency with which ancient Greece just kind of went, sure, that seems normal. But it wasn't just seductions and transformations. Zeus was also an Olympian micromanager. He overthrew his own father, Cronus, because he was tired of being eaten alive, relatable, and then ruled by handing out kingdoms, thrones, and punishments like they were collectible trading cards. You watch him throw down a thunderbolt in a fit of pique. Somewhere, probably, a tree catches fire. No one reacts, not even the goat again. Ares walks past, shirtless as always, and grunts something about wanting to invade Sparta again. Zeus nods distractedly and mutters, "Sure, go play," without even looking up. You get the sense he's very much a father who's lost count of how many kids he has and simply hopes they don't all show up at once. A curious scroll near a lounging muse catches your eye. It lists Zeus's offspring. It goes on, and on, and on. Hercules, Perseus, Helen of Troy, Minos, the Muses, Apollo, Artemis. Wait, how did he father Artemis and seduce women by pretending to be Artemis? Let's not go there. Mainstream history pegs Zeus as a syncretic figure, amalgamated from sky gods across ancient Indo-European cultures. He's the storm wielder, the father figure, the lawgiver. But the fringe theory you can't unhear is that Zeus represents not justice, but dominance. Every time he transforms, or deceives, or punishes with impunity, you're not watching righteousness. You're watching unchecked power at work. You stroll into his personal trophy room, where divine artifacts are lined up like souvenirs from various misadventures. There's the Aegis shield, the remains of a temple struck by lightning, and, curiously, a pile of burned-out scrolls labeled complaint forms, Hera only. You ask him about mortals. His expression shifts, just slightly. There's a glint of something behind those lightning-colored eyes. Regret, curiosity, boredom. Mortal hearts are full of stories, he says at last, in a voice that finally drops below shouting. They burn bright, then vanish. But they remember us, even when we forget ourselves. It's not quite wisdom, but it's close enough for someone who once turned into a literal rain cloud to get a date. And then, in the time it takes you to blink, he's gone again. A peacock feather in the air, the only proof he was ever there. Back in the main hall, a marble bust of Zeus rotates lazily like some divine lava lamp. Hera glares at it. Somewhere behind you, thunder rolls. You take a breath and keep walking. Because if you thought Zeus was dramatic, wait until you meet the other half of this marriage. You don't find Hera so much as she finds you. The air tightens slightly, like it's holding its breath. The clouds part with polite precision, and there she stands, regal, unmoving, and dressed like she's ready for a red carpet event at the Temple of Eternal Grudges. Queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, women, an excellent memory when it comes to personal slights. Hera doesn't make thunder. She doesn't shapeshift into barnyard animals. She doesn't need to. Her silence alone could turn a cyclops to stone. She gestures for you to follow, and because you're not entirely sure she won't turn you into a houseplant if you decline, you obey. The corridor you enter smells of lavender and scorched hopes. It's lined with portraits of mortals, mostly women, each framed in gold, each with a very unfortunate story attached to it. You've just entered Hera's grudge gallery. Zeus thinks he's clever, she says calmly, pausing beside one of the paintings, but I record everything. Her voice is soft, like distant thunder over a still lake. Calm, but promising weather. She taps one image, Io. A priestess turned into a cow to hide Zeus's affair. Hera had Argus, the 100-eyed giant, watch her. Spoiler, that ended in more lightning, more death, and more divine eye-rolling. You move on quickly. Another painting. Semele. Persuaded by Hera, in disguise obviously, to ask Zeus to reveal his full god form. Result: instant incineration. Semele becomes cosmic toast, and Hera adds one more checkmark to her revenge spreadsheet. Historians still argue whether Hera was truly a villain, or just written that way by the same myth makers who glorified her husband's nonsense. To some, she's a cautionary tale about jealousy. To others, a goddess just doing her best to enforce accountability in a cosmos built on male chaos. You pass a statue of Heracles. Yes, that Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman. To Hera, he's basically walking, talking evidence of betrayal. So she made it her divine side quest to ruin his life. The snakes in his cradle? Hera. The madness that caused his tragic deeds? Hera. The 12 labors? Technically not her, but don't tell her that. And yet, she didn't kill him, didn't strike him down. That's not her way. Hera doesn't deal in drama. She deals in endurance. She waits. She watches. She makes her point slowly, like a curse that feels like coincidence. You reach a private garden, blooming with roses, lilies, and, bizarrely, a single wilting fig tree. That one belonged to Leto, she mutters. You nod like you totally remember which myth Leto was from. Hint: mother of Apollo and Artemis, snubbed by every inn and tree on earth thanks to Hera's no vacancy campaign. In the center of the garden is a pedestal. On it, a bound scroll glowing faintly with divine energy. You lean closer. It's Hera's Book of Vows. My version, she says coolly. Mortals always get his side of the story, but I made oaths too, and I remember them all. There's a fringe theory, whispered in the lonelier corners of academia, that Hera once ruled alone, before Zeus was even a name in the sky. That she's older than Olympus, a relic of matriarchal worship, repackaged for patriarchal poets. No one knows for sure, but you wouldn't bet against it. You follow her past a reflecting pool, where fragments of myth play out in reverse. Helen of Troy being unkidnapped, Pandora closing the jar, Zeus not turning into a swan. Hera watches these alternate timelines with a flicker of something in her gaze. Not regret, more like resignation. And then, a rare thing happens. She smiles, just faintly. I do love him, she says, like she's stating the terms of a treaty she helped negotiate but didn't sign. But I also love justice, and sometimes you can't have both. Somewhere behind you, the sound of clinking goblets, loud laughter, and the unmistakable thrum of Dionysian bass. Olympus continues. The gods continue. But Hera, she stays here, watching, calculating, composing the next item in her endless ledger. A breeze carries the scent of lemon and lightning. She turns away, already done with you, already 2 schemes ahead. And just like that, you're outside her domain again, blinking in the warmer light of Olympus proper. Behind you, the doors close with an elegance that feels both polite and permanent. You realize something as you walk on. Zeus may rule Olympus, but Hera remembers it. The air around you thickens, cooler now, with a stillness that feels like it's waiting to be broken. You step down a spiraling marble staircase that should not logically exist in the sky, but welcome to Olympus. Physics takes a coffee break here. At first, you assume it leads to some divine basement, or possibly Dionysus's wine cellar. But no, this stairwell spirals deeper than any cellar. It slips past the clouds, the stars, even memory itself. You're going underground, and that means one thing: Hades. You arrive not with a scream or a bang, but with a very bureaucratic rustle. The underworld isn't what you expect. There are no rivers of fire, no endless wailing. Instead, there's a faint whiff of mineral dust, rows of filing cabinets taller than mountains, and a reception desk carved out of obsidian. Hades doesn't make a grand entrance. He appears like a sigh, stepping from the shadows in a neatly pressed tunic, expression equal parts tired and unimpressed. God of the dead, Lord of the underworld, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, but none of their flair. He didn't get a palace in the clouds or a frothy ocean to flex in. He got the basement, the very important, terrifying, silence-cloaked basement. And honestly, he kind of prefers it that way. You follow him through cavernous halls that echo with footsteps and memories. The walls hum faintly with the names of the dead, etched in languages long forgotten. A three-headed dog lounges lazily at the threshold. Cerberus, the world's most intimidating good boy, currently chewing on what looks like a philosopher's sandal. People think I'm evil, Hades mutters as you pass a hallway labeled Asphodel Admin. I'm not evil. I'm organized. It's true. The underworld isn't hell. It's just final, and it needs to be managed. Dead souls don't file themselves, after all. Historians still argue whether Hades ever wanted this job, or if he drew the short straw after the Titanomachy. Either way, he's stuck with it. And he runs it with the weary precision of a mid-level manager who has seen things. You pass through judgment chambers, each with its own mood lighting and a massive scale, where souls are weighed against deeds, oaths, and sometimes oddly specific lunch receipts. The judges of the dead, Rhadamanthus, Minos, and Iacchus, are in session, and one of them appears to be arguing with a ghost about how accidental a particular betrayal really was. Hades doesn't interfere. He just nods grimly and moves on. In one side room, you glimpse Elysium, Greek paradise. It's oddly mellow. Souls lying in golden meadows, listening to music, sipping wine that never empties. One guy's practicing poetry, badly. Another is trying to pet a butterfly for the last hour. You can almost hear Hades's internal eye roll. Everyone thinks they'll end up here, he mutters. But most go to Asphodel. It's just gray. He shrugs. Like ancient bureaucracy, eternal middle management. There's a lesser-known theory, whispered by some scholars, that Hades isn't just the god of death, he's the god of boundaries. Between life and death, body and soul, order and chaos. That's why he doesn't leave. Someone has to guard the line. And it's not that he never comes up for air. Just that, when he does, everything usually goes sideways, like with Persephone. Ah, yes, that story. You enter a chamber that shifts seasons as you walk. Snow melts into spring blossoms, wilts into summer gold, and curls into autumn ash. The air pulses with her name. Persephone, half queen, half prisoner, full enigma. There she stands, briefly, half in shadow, half in bloom, before vanishing like a memory that's too painful to keep. Hades looks away. That wasn't the plan, he murmurs. Did he steal her? Did she choose to stay? Historians still debate the narrative. Kidnap or compromise, myth or metaphor. The Eleusinian mysteries, secret rites, honoring Demeter and Persephone, hint at death as transformation, not punishment. But no one knows. And Hades doesn't offer spoilers. What's clear is that he loves her. The quiet kind of love, heavy and invisible, like gravity. You pass through the fields of punishment next, reserved for the worst of the worst. Not everyone's burning. Some are stuck in awkward, ironic loops. A liar forever chasing his own truth, a tyrant forced to serve tea to the very people he oppressed. You pass Sisyphus, of course, pushing his rock up the hill again. He nods at you like an exhausted gym bro. You nod back. Before you leave, Hades stops at a great door, carved with endless swirling patterns. No one knows what's beyond this, he says. Not even us. You press your hand against it. It's cold. It hums with possibility. Then you step back. There's no grand goodbye. Hades just vanishes into a corridor marked Soul Audits. You're left with the distant sound of a pen scratching across an eternal ledger. And when you rise again, through a crack in the earth, through layers of myth and stone, you feel changed. Like you've peeked at the machinery behind the curtain. The dead are not screaming. They're just waiting. You're not sure how long you've been walking. Olympus has no clocks, and the underworld definitely doesn't issue exit receipts. But as you emerge into softer light, sunlight, real and warm, you feel a shift. The ground is greener here, softer, covered in wildflowers you can't quite name and grasses that sway, even though there's no breeze. Birds call overhead, and somewhere, a bee hums like a lullaby. And standing right in the middle of it all, basket in hand, is Persephone, not the half-glimpsed shadow from Hades' memory. This is full spring Persephone, queen of the blossoms, goddess of renewal, and the reason your allergies start every March. She turns and smiles, a little crooked. You're just in time, she says. I'm only halfway through my existential identity crisis. You follow her as she strolls through her meadow kingdom. She wears flowers in her hair, some fresh, some wilting, all deliberate. You get the sense that every petal means something. Maybe every loss does too. You're in the upper half of her myth now, the part where she returns each spring to the world of the living, bringing new life with her. Plants grow, lambs frolic. Mortals rejoice and pretend not to notice the frost clinging to her hem. According to the mainstream myth, she was kidnapped by Hades and taken to the underworld. Her mother, Demeter, goddess of harvests and full-time helicopter parent, lost it. Famine, drought, chaos. Eventually, a deal was struck. Persephone could return to Earth for part of the year, but had to stay in the underworld for the rest. Something about eating 6 pomegranate seeds. Rookie mistake. But here's the twist. Some versions say she chose to eat them. There's a fringe theory, gaining quiet traction, that Persephone wasn't abducted at all, but initiated. That her descent was a rite of passage. That she became queen not through chains, but choice. Historians still argue whether the myth is one of victimhood or empowerment. Was Persephone a pawn, or the architect of a dual existence? Light and dark, bloom and decay, life and what comes after. She stops near a tree that seems impossibly old. Its roots curl around fossilized bones and ancient sandals. Everyone always talks about how I leave, she says, plucking a blossom. But no one asks why I come back. She gestures toward the field, where children laugh and play in a dreamlike loop. This is what they forget, that you can love the dark and the light, that winter makes spring sweeter. As you sit beside her, the landscape shifts gently. Trees rise around you, first green, then red, and gold, then bare as bone. Time folds in on itself, like a story retold each year. The air carries cinnamon, then frost, then the first green scent of thaw. Persephone tells you a secret, and you lean close to hear it. I am not what they made me. It hits you harder than you expect. She's not just a goddess of spring. She's a goddess of cycles, of change, of becoming. And you realize she's the only god who changes. The rest are locked into their eternal roles, reenacting the same dramas on loop. But Persephone? She shifts. She grows. She leaves and returns. She dies and blooms, over and over. You ask her how it feels to live two lives. She twirls a strand of hair around her finger, thinking. Like being in two stories at once, she says. One written in sunlight, the other in ash. You want to stay longer, but the flowers are beginning to close. The bees are growing quiet. The meadow dims, not with fear, but with a kind of closing curtain. She walks you back to the threshold where Olympus tilts back into view. Tell them I'm not trapped, she says gently. I just know where I'm needed. And with that, she's gone. You glance down and notice something tucked in your hand. A pomegranate seed. It's not glowing. It doesn't whisper. But it feels warm. A reminder. As you step away from the meadow, back into the clamor of immortal nonsense and divine melodrama, you can't help but carry a bit of Persephone with you. The part that blooms and the part that waits. You return to the divine landscape of Olympus with pollen in your hair and a vague sense that you've just been emotionally restructured by a flower goddess. But don't worry, you won't be allowed to reflect for long. The temperature rises, the clouds grow a little heavier, and then a splash. Poseidon has arrived. You don't see him at first, you hear him. The crash of waves, the shriek of seagulls, and the very wet sound of someone tossing a trident onto a marble floor without caring if it chips. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, horses, and unprovoked saltiness is in the house, and he's shirtless, of course. You find him reclining in a seawater throne, one leg tossed over an armrest, his hair glistening with seawater and hubris. He looks like the kind of guy who'd turn your town into a coral reef because he didn't like your toast. Mortals, he grumbles, scanning you with a wave-soaked eyebrow raise. Still building cities too close to the coast? You nod sheepishly. It seems safest. Poseidon is Zeus's brother, technically the middle child of the big three, but emotionally he's the oldest cousin who never outgrew his pirate phase. Where Zeus rules the sky and Hades runs the underworld, Poseidon got the ocean, which he treats like both a playground and a weapon. You walk with him as the path tilts downward and the walls drip with condensation. Everything smells faintly of brine and seaweed, like a mythic aquarium that's seen some things. He gestures grandly to a mosaic of his past glories. There's the time he created horses from sea foam, because why not? Another scene shows him flooding Attica when the Athenians chose Athena over him. You ask if he regrets that. Absolutely not, he growls. They chose wisdom. I offered an eternal saltwater fountain. You don't argue. He still seems bitter about the olive tree. Historians still argue whether Poseidon was more than just a water god. Some believe he originated as a fertility deity, connected to horses, earthquakes, and moisture as a life-giving force. But somewhere along the myth timeline, he evolved, or rather, devolved, into a temperamental tsunami in a beard. You pass a room filled with miniature ships, each a tribute from terrified sailors. In the corner sits a framed photo of Odysseus with darts stuck in it. That guy, Poseidon mutters, 10 years of storms and still didn't learn not to poke the Cyclops. And speaking of Cyclopes, yes, Poseidon's sons, sort of. The family tree here looks less like a tree and more like a tangle of seaweed and bad decisions. There's Polyphemus, of Odysseus stabbed me in the eye, fame. Then Triton, who basically does the merman thing, but with more screaming. Then there are the sea monsters he fathered. Too many teeth, not enough boundaries. You walk along a boardwalk made of polished driftwood. Schools of fish swim below, forming shapes as you pass. Tridents, waves. At one point, what looks suspiciously like a middle finger. Poseidon chuckles. They're cheeky. The sea god pauses at a window, just a gap in the cloud wall, and gestures to the mortal world below. A coastline, glittering. Calm for now, but you can feel it. The potential for rage. The push and pull of tides that remember every insult. I could sink it, he says casually. Just one quake, one wave. You glance at him, unsure if he's bragging or warning, maybe both. But then something shifts. The bravado fades. His voice lowers. You know they never pray like they used to, he says. Not since the ships got engines. Not since the satellites. A pause. They don't fear the sea anymore. There's an odd loneliness in that sentence. A god, not forgotten, but outgrown. Or at least ignored. Which might be worse. He leads you down one last hallway, this one carved from coral and pearl. Statues line the walls, not gods, sailors, lost ones, worshippers, shipbuilders. Every name is known to him. Even now, he says, when the storms take them, they call out my name. Right before the water closes, you look back, and his eyes are full of ocean. Deep and ancient, and very, very tired. Tell them I'm not just wrath, he says quietly. I'm depth. And just like that, he vanishes, dissolving into sea spray that glitters for a moment, then fades. You're left on the shore of Olympus again, the tide lapping gently at your feet. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. Not Zeus this time, just Poseidon, reminding the world he's still there, still watching, still waiting. The sea salt still lingers in your hair when the winds change again. Cooler now, brushed with a feather-light hush. You sense something quieter taking shape. The air grows still, intentional. You're entering a different kind of domain. No crashing thunder, no trident splash swagger. Just the sound of parchment turning, the quiet clink of armor being buckled in perfect symmetry, and the distant hoot of an owl. Athena is already waiting. She stands in a stone library that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. It rises out of the clouds like it's always been there, just waiting to be noticed. The walls shift subtly. One moment, an archive of battle plans. The next, an amphitheater of debate. She adjusts her helmet, not for protection, but precision. Goddess of wisdom, war strategy, handicrafts, and I told you so energy. If Olympus had an academic dean, it would be her. And yes, the owl is real. It's watching you from a rafter like it's judging your GPA. You open your mouth, and Athena already knows what you're going to ask. No, I wasn't born normally, she says. Then she points up, right out of Zeus's skull. Headache of the century. Indeed, mainstream myth has her springing fully armored from her father's forehead after he swallowed her mother, Medes, the goddess of deep thought. You try not to think about the implications of that, but the metaphor is hard to ignore. She came from knowledge, devouring knowledge, and then became the answer. Athena moves as if time doesn't touch her. She walks you through her temple, where every step echoes like a history lecture. Diagrams of ancient cities cover the floor. Maps of failed empires flicker on the walls like ghostly PowerPoint slides. She leads you to a great table strewn with blueprints, not of buildings, but strategies, battles, alliances, rivalries. Every war humanity has waged laid out like a chess match. Her finger hovers over the Battle of Troy, and for a second you swear you see a tear she'll never admit to. Smart doesn't mean soft, she says. They always forget that. Historians still argue whether Athena was a protector or a warmonger, wisdom incarnate or just very efficient at managing violence. But one thing is clear: when she steps into a war, it ends her way. You pause beside a tapestry woven by Arachne. It's exquisite, terrifying, alive. You ask if it's the original. Of course, she says. We don't discard skill here, just arrogance. There's a subtle jab there, but you're not sure if it's aimed at Arachne or Zeus. Athena moves on. You enter what looks like an advice column come to life. Mortals depicted in glowing panels, praying, asking for guidance. One wants victory, another wants wisdom. A third just wants help with a broken loom. She answers them all, not with thunder, but clarity. One panel shows Odysseus, trapped on Calypso's island, muttering about raft blueprints. She sighs. He always gets distracted. Athena isn't flashy. She's not soft either. She's the quiet force behind every successful campaign, every clever escape. She's the reason why clever girl is both a compliment and a warning. But she's not without emotion. She stops at a column etched with the names of heroes she's helped. Some lived, some didn't. Her hand rests on one, Achilles. I tried, she says. And then, with even more weight, she adds, some minds are built for glory, not for peace. The owl flutters down and lands on your shoulder. It's weirdly comforting, also slightly terrifying. Its eyes suggest it knows your search history. Athena gives a faint smile. Want to ask something? She says. You hesitate. Everything? Nothing? I already know, she says, and then she hands you something small, a silver thread. For when the path looks tangled, she says, it's not magic, just perspective. The world around you fades, not with drama, but with understanding. You leave her temple calmer, more alert, as if your thoughts are finally filing themselves. And as you go, the owl hoots once, quietly, like punctuation at the end of a brilliant thought. You may not remember the facts later, but you'll remember the feeling of being understood. Before the silence of Athena's temple can fully settle into your bones, it's shattered, gloriously, by the thump of a drum, a burst of flute, and the unmistakable sound of someone laughing far too hard for someone only half dressed in a leopard skin. You brace yourself. Dionysus has entered the scene. You're immediately swept into a road that wasn't there a moment ago. It curves like a drunken thought, paved in grapevines and lined with dancing shadows. A chariot rolls past, pulled by panthers. There's someone doing cartwheels in the distance. A satyr offers you a cup of wine and absolutely no explanation. Welcome to the god of wine, revelry, madness, ecstasy, theater, and terrible impulse control. Dionysus doesn't walk. He stumbles fabulously. And he doesn't just speak. He monologues, gesturing so wildly you're nearly hit in the face by a dangling grapevine. You're late, he purrs, wrapping an arm around your shoulder as if you've been friends since birth. We've already started the second ritual. You missed the part where we turned a pirate into a dolphin. Tragic, but hilarious. He offers you wine. You take it. It tastes like summer, heartbreak, and a bad decision made with full enthusiasm. And then the parade begins. Dionysus is always going somewhere. A procession of satyrs, maenads, his wild, dancing female followers, and disoriented poets follows him across mountains and cities, leaving vines in their wake, and at least 3 people behind in every town. You're now part of this absurd carnival, swept up in tambourines and honey cakes. But it's not just party tricks. there's something deeper. The laughter gets a little too loud. The music sometimes veers into something unsettling. The wine doesn't just make you giddy, it makes you see. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was imported from Thrace or Asia Minor. He arrived late to Olympus and never quite fit in. Some even say he was a mortal who became a god. Others believe he represents a part of the human mind that defies order. Intuition, ecstasy, irrational joy, divine madness. Whatever he is, he's here now, and he's climbing onto a makeshift stage. "Let me tell you a story," he says, wine sloshing from his goblet. "It's about how I died, and then didn't." He begins to act it out. His mother Semele, his dramatic birth, being sewn into Zeus's thigh like the world's weirdest baby carrier. His childhood spent hiding from Hera's wrath, his travels, his conquests. But his tone shifts. "I wasn't born to rule," he says. "I was born to remind you what it feels like." The music dims. His voice softens. "Everyone fears losing control," he murmurs. "But sometimes, that's when you find what's real." He gestures to a statue being carried past. It's not of him. It's of a woman mid-spin, laughing, her hair wild, her feet barely touching the ground. "She found freedom," he says, "right before the town burned down. But still." You stumble along with the crowd through olive groves, past amphitheaters, and across rivers that turn to wine when Dionysus winks at them. The stars above you begin to spin. A goat plays the lyre, or maybe it's a man who looks like a goat. Either way, it's oddly beautiful. Then, a moment of stillness. Dionysus stops. The party hushes. He looks up, serious for the first time. "Don't forget," he says, "this isn't just joy. It's transformation." And in that instant you see him, not just as a drunk reveler, but as a god who bridges the line between ecstasy and madness, between pretending and truth. He smiles at you, and it's both warm and unnerving. "You've got wine in your soul now," he says. "Use it wisely." He raises his goblet to the sky, and the clouds swirl in applause. Then he's off again, vanishing in a swirl of ivy and applause, halfway through a dramatic retelling of that time he turned an entire city into vines because someone called him overly theatrical. Which, to be fair, he definitely is. You stand alone now. The road behind you has vanished. The music echoes faintly, like a dream trying to remember itself. And somewhere deep inside you, a little corner of chaos has been unlocked. It hums quietly and dances. You find yourself walking away from the vanished vineyards in rhythmic frenzy with a faint buzz still tingling at the edges of your senses. The music lingers like a perfume you can't name. And then, suddenly everything goes quiet. Not eerily quiet. Just still. No satyrs, no scrolls, no tridents, no storm clouds. And then you feel it. Heat. Dry, direct, deliberate. You're standing at the edge of a sun-bleached courtyard, stones radiating warmth beneath your feet. The air here smells of olive oil, dust, and newly sharpened bronze. There is no softness, no room for nonsense. This is the domain of Artemis, and she is watching you. She steps out from the shadows of a cypress tree, bough slung over her shoulder, eyes clear and unreadable. The goddess of the hunt, of the wilderness, of young girls and moonlight and very firm boundaries. She does not smile. "Don't follow unless you can keep up," she says. So, naturally, you follow. She leads you into a forest that materializes around the courtyard like it's growing straight from her mood. Tall trees arch overhead. The path is narrow, the silence louder than words. Artemis doesn't speak often, but when she does, it's with the kind of sharpness that makes mortals pause mid-sacrifice and rethink their whole approach. She gestures to a buck in the distance. It lifts its head, senses her, then bounds away into the underbrush. I could have taken it, she says, but not everything needs to be conquered. You nod, or possibly flinch. Same effect. The mythology surrounding her is intense and a little intimidating. She's the eternal maiden, fiercely independent, never married, never tamed. Unlike other goddesses, she doesn't deal in flattery or seduction. She doesn't need temples full of incense. She prefers mountaintops and dark forests. Her worshippers? Mostly young women seeking protection or power, and hunters trying very hard not to offend her. You arrive at a clearing dotted with ancient altars. Some are moss-covered. Others are freshly stained with olive oil and small bones. Offerings. You step carefully. She doesn't forget, Artemis says, and you're not sure if she's speaking in the third person or referring to someone else. Either way, noted. There's one altar different from the rest. It holds a single lock of hair. For Iphigenia, she says. Ah, that one. According to myth, Artemis demanded the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia, to allow the Greek fleet to sail to Troy. It's a story soaked in sorrow and debate. Did Artemis accept the sacrifice? Did she save the girl at the last moment and whisk her away to serve as a priestess? Historians still argue. The myths contradict themselves. Maybe that's the point. She was brave, Artemis says simply. Not all heroes carry swords. You walk in silence again, deeper into the forest. Moonlight begins to filter in. You hadn't noticed the sun had set. Or maybe it hasn't. Maybe you're in Artemis's hour now. She pauses to point out an owl, a lynx, a girl running barefoot through the trees, her laughter fading into the branches. Freedom, she says. It's not something you're given. You take it. There's a fringe theory that Artemis represents a pre-patriarchal deity, one who kept power by refusing every social role expected of her. No mother, no wife, no lover, just motion, purpose, shadow, and silence. You glance down and notice your footsteps have left no mark. This place isn't made for staying. As you turn back, Artemis speaks once more. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. Then she's gone. Not in a burst. Not with flair. She simply fades. You emerge from the trees into open sky once more, breath caught somewhere between awe and relief. There's no grand temple behind you, just stars, and the soft whisper of something wild, watching. You barely have time to adjust to the open sky before the ground beneath your feet becomes softer, warmer, like it's soaked in sunshine and storytelling. The stars overhead don't fade. They shimmer more brightly, forming patterns, animals, stories in motion. The constellations are shifting. You've entered the domain of Apollo, and he's already playing the lyre. Seated on a marble step, golden hair catching the starlight like he definitely planned it that way, Apollo greets you with the sort of grin only someone who knows he's brilliant can manage. His fingers pluck lazily at his instrument, each note weaving into the air like honey, silk, and just a whisper of arrogance. "Welcome to my better half," he says with a wink. "The sun will be along shortly." God of light, music, prophecy, medicine, poetry, and unbearable perfection, as several ancient poets may or may not have muttered in private. Apollo is Artemis's twin, but you won't find two more different siblings in the entire pantheon. Where Artemis is all shadow and silence, Apollo is radiance and rhythm, like someone lit a concert on fire and gave it a doctor's license. You follow him through a courtyard that slowly transforms into Delphi itself. columns rising from mist, the faint echo of oracles whispering from every stone. This is where mortals came with burning questions, offered coins and goats, and waited for Apollo's answers. Or, more accurately, the answers of Pythia, his priestess, often high on fumes from the chasm below the temple, muttering poetic riddles that made even generals scratch their heads and rethink their battle plans. Historians still argue whether the oracle's trance was truly divine or chemically induced. But either way, Apollo had the final say. God of clarity, of knowing, of saying, "I told you so," in haiku form. As you walk, Apollo gestures toward an amphitheater where shadows reenact his greatest hits. "That's the time I flayed a satyr for losing a music contest," he says cheerily. "He was very off-key." You raise an eyebrow. "I gave him a chance," he adds. Indeed, Apollo wasn't always sunshine and songs. Behind the melodies lies a streak of brutal order. Harmony, yes, but enforced with surgical precision. He cured plagues and caused them. His arrows could heal or rot. You pass another statue, Hyacinthus, mid-fall, struck by a discus. Apollo pauses. "Accidents," he murmurs. "Even gods make them." You get the sense he's still mourning, centuries later. His loves, Hyacinthus, Daphne, Cyparissus, are tragic, beautiful, and always fleeting. The god of youth doesn't get to keep it. He shows you the medicine hall next, lined with scrolls, herbs, and a cauldron that may be brewing both tea and divine antibiotics. "They forget I taught humans healing," he says. "Without me, there's no Hippocrates, no hospitals, no vitamin gummies." You believe him? Probably. He points to a constellation forming above. Orion, the hunter. "He ran with Artemis," Apollo says, "until a pause. Sibling rivalry. It got away from me." Fringe scholars whisper about that story. Some say Apollo tricked Artemis into killing Orion to protect her virginity, or out of jealousy. Others say he wanted control. Still others claim it was simply divine ego, the kind that writes tragedies like it's composing a melody. You step into a final chamber, his music hall. Columns carved with verses from Homer to Sappho. Lyres and flutes hung like precious weapons. A mural shows 9 women dancing. The muses, his companions. Inspiration incarnate. "Mortals think creativity is magic," he says. It's not. It's memory. Pain turned into rhythm. Truth arranged into something you can hum. You sit with him for a while. He plays a soft tune, one you almost recognize. It winds through your chest, loosening something. It doesn't answer your questions. It just makes them easier to carry. "Not everything needs resolution," he says. "Some things need resonance." The sun begins to rise behind him, naturally, as if on cue. Apollo doesn't move. He's already part of it. You blink, and he's gone. Just warm light, and the last note, still hanging in the air, still vibrating in your ribs. And for the first time in this journey, you hum along. The sun still glows faintly on your skin, Apollo's final chord trailing behind you like golden ribbon. But now, the temperature begins to shift again. Not colder, but quieter. Like stepping into a room where someone's thinking deeply and doesn't want to be interrupted. Ahead, a door swings open. Not grand or gilded, but plain. Black wood, brass handle. Smells like parchment and candle smoke. Inside waits Hephaestus. He doesn't greet you with fanfare. In fact, he barely notices you at first. He's hunched over an anvil the size of a chariot, sparks flying in timed bursts. Everything in this workshop moves with purpose, no chaos, just creation. God of fire, smithing, volcanoes, invention. and what we'll generously call complex domestic drama. He doesn't look like the statues. His beard is singed. His hands are rough. One leg limps slightly. There's soot on his tunic, and probably in his soul. But his eyes are bright, with something most gods don't possess. Focus. He glances at you and gestures to a stool. You sit. The air is warm, with forge heat, and the soft hum of enchanted metal cooling nearby. You're wondering what I make, he says, without turning. You nod. Everything, he replies. And it's true. The walls are lined with weapons, armor, automata, bronze birds that blink, hammers that float, a shield that quietly recites insults to itself in Homeric Greek. Hephaestus is the only Olympian who builds. The others destroy, command, enchant. He creates. He gave gods their gear, Achilles' armor, Hermes' winged sandals, even Pandora herself, crafted with divine precision and a side of existential dread. And yet, his story isn't glorious. According to myth, Hera threw him off Olympus when she saw his imperfect leg. Others say it was Zeus during one of their cosmic disagreements. Either way, he fell. Down, down, into the sea. Raised by sea nymphs, taught by flame. Returned to Olympus on his own terms. Historians still argue whether his lameness was symbolic, a metaphor for imperfection in a world obsessed with symmetry. Fringe theories suggest Hephaestus predates the Olympian order, a god of ancient volcanic worship, reshaped into a craftsman to fit the aesthetic. He doesn't seem to care either way. He picks up a piece of molten bronze, turning it slowly with tongs. The firelight reflects in his eyes like a forge remembering old secrets. Do you know what the gods fear most? He asks. You shake your head. Need. He hammers once, gently. They don't build. I do. That means they come to me. You look around. There's a half-finished net on a table, likely the same one he once used to trap his wife, Aphrodite, with Ares in their, shall we say, interrupted moment. There's bitterness in the air, but not self-pity, just memory, tempered and filed down to usefulness. He pauses his work, finally turning fully toward you. I don't do pretty, he says. I do real. And you believe him. There's a sculpture in the corner. Abstract, twisted, molten, and unfinished. You ask what it is. He shrugs. An idea I can't finish yet. Maybe never will. He smiles faintly, like a secret he's not sure he wants to keep. The room shifts around you, now shaped like a volcano's throat, glowing with steady heat. He guides you to the rim of a platform, where molten lava churns below like angry honey. This is where I was made, he says. Not born. Made. Then he hands you something unexpected. A tiny gear, warm and humming. Take it. You won't know where it fits yet, but when you build something real, anything that lasts, you'll need it. The forge grows dim. He's already returned to work, muttering to a hammer that glows when he speaks. You step back toward the doorway. It swings open soundlessly, and the warmth fades behind you. And as you walk away, you feel the weight of what he gave you. Not heavy, but dense. Like potential. Like something waiting to become more. The path away from the forge winds into shadow. Not the deep earthy black of Hades' underworld, or the misty twilight of Artemis's woods. This shadow is richer, more theatrical. Velvet, not void. You hear a giggle, then a hiss, then a swish. And just like that, you are absolutely in Aphrodite's realm. The lighting here is impossibly flattering. Warm pinks, soft ambers. Everything seems bathed in golden hour glow, even though there's no sun in sight. The air smells faintly of roses, pomegranates, and trouble. A curtain parts. Of course it's silk. And there she is. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, seduction, and catastrophic emotional decisions made in candlelight. She's reclining on a seashell-shaped couch, trailing one finger through a bowl of honey as if it just might reveal someone's future. Or ruin it. She doesn't rise. She radiates. "Oh, good," she says, smiling like you just complimented her earrings. "A visitor who doesn't reek of war or insecurity. Come sit." You sit. You're suddenly very aware of your posture, your hair, your last breakup, and whether love is a real emotion or just hormonal chaos dressed in poetry. She leans in conspiratorially. "Let's be honest," she whispers. "You only care about the gods when they start dating each other or destroying mortals for love." It's not untrue. You glance around her temple. It's less like a place of worship and more like the dressing room of someone who owns every mirror. Statues of lovers locked in impossible embraces. Friezes showing mortals swooning, fighting, marrying, or weeping. And in one corner, a literal closet of golden girdles and enchanted perfumes, half of which probably caused wars. "Aphrodite Pandemos," she murmurs, trailing her hand across a mosaic. "They called me that when I belonged to everyone. Desire itself, not just romantic, not just flesh." She pauses. Power, beauty, the longing to matter. Mainstream myths tie her to the sea. Born from foam, after Cronus chopped up Uranus and tossed his bits into the ocean. Yes, that's the official story. Your therapist would love this family dynamic. Another version? She's the daughter of Zeus and Dione, depending on the day and who's writing the scroll. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite was originally a foreign goddess, likely Eastern, possibly linked to Ishtar or Astarte, imported and sanded down by Greek poets until she fit their aesthetic. But you can still feel her ancientness, something primal beneath the velvet. She's older than Olympus. She strolls with you now, barefoot on marble that shifts beneath your steps like sand. Murmurs fill the air. Every whispered wish ever made in a moment of loneliness. "You humans always think love is soft," she says, brushing petals from a marble fountain. "But it ends empires. It breaks oaths. It's the only thing that makes you stupid enough to try again." There's a portrait hanging beside the fountain, Helen of Troy. Perfect, painted in light. Below it, a cracked mirror. Aphrodite follows your gaze and shrugs. "I didn't start that war," she says. "I just sweetened the deal." You try to ask her about the judgment of Paris, the infamous beauty contest that pitted her against Hera and Athena, ending with Paris choosing her in exchange for the love of the most beautiful woman in the woe. Inside, you glimpse every version of yourself you ever wanted someone to love. You close it quickly. She hands you a rose, fresh, blood red, sharp, with thorns. "Beauty without pain," she says, "is just decoration." You thank her, or try to, but she's already halfway into another pose, adjusting her hair in a mirror that doesn't reflect anything real. She catches your eye one last time. "Don't confuse being wanted," she says softly, "with being seen." And then, as if by cue, a soft wind brushes your face. The perfume fades. The lighting returns to neutral. You're alone, but somehow not. The rose in your hand remains vivid, fragrant, and absolutely real. And as you walk away, you feel it throb slightly with every heartbeat, a reminder that even gods of softness leave marks. You leave Aphrodite's shimmering chamber with the rose still clutched in your hand. Its scent trails behind you, faint, spicy, and a little bit dangerous. The path ahead fades into shadow once more, not the velvet dusk of romance, but a darker, heavier kind. The air thickens, and then you hear laughter. Not the joyful, wine-soaked giggle of Dionysus. This is sharper, playful, but edged. A riddle in a knife sheath. You've just stepped into the gray zone. And waiting there, lounging on a throne made of smoke and mirrors, is Hermes. He gives you a grin, like he knows all your secrets, especially the ones you haven't told yourself yet. Took you long enough, he says. Been keeping the trail warm. Messenger of the gods, god of travelers, thieves, commerce, language, sleep, boundaries, and just a hint of chaos. Hermes is the one everyone forgets until they desperately need something delivered, stolen, or smoothed over. He rises, light on his feet, his winged sandals twitching with anticipation. His cloak shifts color every few seconds. Sometimes silver, sometimes shadow, sometimes exactly the shade of guilt you wore during your last white lie. Come on, he says. Let's walk. But you didn't hear that from me. He takes you down a winding corridor filled with doors, each labeled in languages you don't recognize. Some glow softly. Some buzz, like insects. One is literally smoking. He waves at them like they're friends he sometimes regrets introducing to each other. You know, he says conversationally, I was the first to lead souls to the underworld. Psychopomp. Fancy title. Makes death sound like a guided tour. You pause. You've met Hades, he adds. So, not entirely wrong. Historians still argue whether Hermes was born as a mischief god or evolved into one. He's the only Olympian who seems to get more powerful the more chaotic he becomes. Some say he predates Olympus entirely, an older trickster absorbed into the pantheon like a rogue app in a divine operating system. He pauses beside a pedestal and plucks up a lyre. I made this the day I was born, he says casually, from a tortoise. You stare. Don't worry, he adds. It was already unemployed. He strums it once. Just one note. But it sounds like 10 songs at once. Then he tosses it aside like it's yesterday's distraction. Gave it to Apollo, bought me a pardon and a reputation. That's Hermes in a nutshell. He doesn't conquer. He negotiates. He doesn't fight wars. He ends them with a forged letter or a missing sandal. He's the god of making things work, even when they shouldn't. He leads you into a chamber filled with scrolls. Every prayer ever whispered on the move. A soldier begging for luck. A merchant hoping for fair trade. A child praying their lost dog finds its way home. I hear them all, he says, voice suddenly softer. Not because I'm kind, because I listen. A fringe theory claims Hermes is the only god who still actively visits Earth. Not in thunderbolts or omens, but in missed connections, unexpected paths, clever detours, and perfect timing you can't explain. He smiles at you now, a little wistfully. Most gods want worship. I prefer attention. He pulls a small coin from behind your ear. It gleams like moonlight and memory. For the next crossroads, he says, placing it in your palm. Use it when you're lost, but only if you want to be found. You ask him, just before you go, if he ever rests. He laughs again, low and warm. Rest is for endings. I'm all about movement. The world around him begins to blur, like smoke being exhaled. Oh, he says over his shoulder, halfway into another hallway that leads to nowhere and everywhere. Don't trust maps. Trust the weird feeling in your gut. And then, of course, he's gone. You're alone again, but not empty. Your pockets are heavier now. A rose from Aphrodite, a thread from Athena, a gear from Hephaestus, a coin from Hermes, and something from every other god, tucked deep in your memory like stardust under your nails. You've met them all. And now, the wind begins to slow. The voices fade. The divine steps back. You settle now, feeling the weight of everything you've gathered, not as a burden, but as a warmth collecting in your chest. Your body softens. Your breath slows. The gods are quiet now. The marble paths have faded into mist. The temples dissolve like early morning dreams. You're no longer walking, but gently drifting. Somewhere far away, a lyre plays. The faint scent of olive groves drifts by. A soft wind brushes your face, cooler than before, carrying the hush of forgotten myths, the kind that sit quietly in the back of your mind, waiting to be remembered at just the right moment. Let it go now. The temples, the voices, the divine drama, and mythic melodrama. Let the gods return to their pedestals, their forests, their clouds, and caverns. Let your shoulders drop, your thoughts quiet, your pulse slow to match the rhythm of the turning stars. You are no longer a visitor in Olympus. You are simply a dreamer, gently easing towards sleep. There is no lesson to hold on to now, no symbol to decipher, no prophecy to chase. Just the warm memory of a story passed down through time, tangled, imperfect, strange, and still somehow beautiful. Your breath deepens. The sky stretches out like silk above you, and in this quiet space, between myth and sleep, you are safe. You are still, and you are home. End of script. Sweet dreams.